No one tells you this when you start medicine, and it's not even something you might be able to feel initially. It's difficult to explain clearly, and there's no single moment where something seems to break, nothing that's really obvious that signals this problem. No clear point where you can say that your performance or well-being suddenly has declined. But what happens is gradual. Your energy becomes less stable, your thinking becomes slightly noisier, and your routines become less consistent. And your ability to recover fully between periods of work starts to decline as well. Because all of this happens slowly, it's very easy to normalize it. You assume this is just what the job feels like, and you probably look at your colleagues, and a lot of them also feel like this. You kind of think, oh yeah, this is just the culture, this is just normal. But over time you start to lose your previous sense of self. You assume this is just what is accepted, this is what you've become, but what you're actually experiencing is the accumulation of specific psychological, physiological and cognitive loads that are not properly resolved. And if you do not understand those mechanisms, you cannot fix them, and you cannot get back to your best self where you're actually energized, fully recovered between shifts and fully able to express your own self, your own energy, and get the best out of yourself essentially and enjoy your work. So I've worked with doctors who are doing well professionally, progressing in their careers and functioning at a high level, and yet privately they feel increasingly tired, disconnected, and less like themselves over time. They often cannot point to a single problem, but they know something has shifted. And I've also experienced this firsthand as well, at least 2 times in my life. So one point led me to living in a van, pretty chaotic, and the other I was repeating 4th year in medical school as well. So I've certainly experienced the version of this personally, and it was really, a chaotic time, a period where you accumulate a lot of stress, irregular structure, and a lack of recovery, creating a gradual decline in how you feel and operate. So the first hidden reason is cognitive decline. And as a doctor, your brain is rarely at rest in the way most people assume. Even when you're not actively working, your mind continues processing unresolved decisions, anticipating future scenarios, worrying about, that one sick patient or those jobs you have to do tomorrow, and replaying past situations as well. So over time, sustained activation without adequate recovery leads to reduced clarity, slower processing, and a subjective sense of mental fatigue. And what makes this particularly difficult is that it does not feel like traditional tiredness. You can be physically still but mentally overloaded, feeling overwhelmed. And because this type of fatigue is not obvious, it often gets unaddressed. The second hidden cost is nervous system dysregulation. So medicine places you in a repeated cycle of high stress, high responsibility, and in situations where your sympathetic system is constantly heightened and activated. So this is the alert state that allows you to focus, react quickly to things and perform well under pressure. But the problem is not this activation, it is constant activation. So if you can't fully decompress when the event or the situation is over, or maybe even when you're done with your shift and you go home, you're still constantly heightened, that is when the problem happens. So I find if you move from a highly stimulated state into passive activities like scrolling on your phone or watching content or continuing to engage with information, your system never really gets a chance to fully return to baseline. It's constantly being stimulated and activated. And this creates a situation where your body is never fully recovered, even when you're technically resting. And over time, this leads to a state where you feel both tired and wired simultaneously. You're fatigued but unable to switch off properly. Sleep becomes lighter, recovery becomes incomplete, and your baseline state shifts upwards in terms of stress. So the third one is circadian disruption. And this is often caused by things you can't control, especially in doctors with the irregular shifts, going on to nights, going on to evenings, having these inconsistent sleep times, you're not getting into that rhythm, and that can definitely have a massive impact on your circadian rhythm, which regulates hormone release, energy, and cognitive performance. So this is not just about feeling tired. Circadian misalignment affects cortisol patterns, insulin sensitivity and mood regulation, and overall cognitive function, which obviously we all know as doctors, but it's just having that reminder that these things, we are fully at risk, probably greater than the normal population as well, and we need to look after ourselves and be aware of these things that are going on. So when your sleep timing is inconsistent, your body does not receive these stable signals about when to be alert and when to recover. This leads to fluctuations in energy, sleep quality, and a gradual decline in cognitive performance. What makes this particularly challenging is that you can still function, and it's often accepted. In medicine, most people are like this. It's just seen as the norm, and it's just seen as accepted. We can't do much about it. But having said that, I've realized in myself and working with a lot of people that there's a lot we can control, and there's a lot that we can make up for in the things in our control. So the fourth hidden cost is identity compression, and I'll explain what this means. But basically, over time, medicine can become the dominant structure in your life. It can feel like the all-consuming role that you have, and maybe previous roles, creative outlets that you had, identity in sport, fitness, other hobbies, they kind of fade away and you become this doctor, and that's all you are. And that can be a problem. And it's often the case, and it's hard because your schedule is dictated by shifts, your responsibilities are externally defined, your sense of progress is tied to your role. So as this happens, other areas of your life gradually reduce, fade away, and your training might become inconsistent, your hobbies disappear, your time to reflect on your own personal development becomes limited. And this creates a situation where your identity becomes heavily tied to your professional role. And when that role becomes demanding or stressful, you don't really have another outlet or another personality to tap into, which could really benefit you and make you feel like your true self, or express your other parts of your personality that you've neglected. And that can be really beneficial if you do have them in place. But this is not just a lifestyle issue, it's a physiological one as well, because having multiple domains of identity provides resilience. When everything is concentrated in one domain, pressure in that domain has a disproportionate impact on your own sense of self and your own self-identity. And the fifth hidden cost is silent baseline decline, perhaps the most important one, because all of these factors accumulate gradually. Your baseline shifts without you even noticing it. Lower energy starts to feel normal, reduced focus starts to feel normal, and inconsistent routines start to feel like you've got no choice. Because there is no sharp contrast, you start to adapt to a lower level of functioning. And once something feels normal, you stop questioning it. And this is why many doctors remain in a state that is significantly below the level that they used to be operating at. And not because they cannot improve, but because they have adapted to this current state. Now, the important part is understanding that none of this means medicine is the problem. What it means is that the environment you're operating in requires a different approach to recovery, structure, and performance. The solution is not to escape this system, which I thought it was at one point, and maybe you've been there as well, but it's actually to set your own systems up that compensate for these specific stressors. The first step is restoring your nervous system balance. This means deliberately introducing periods of down-regulation, such as walking or low stimulation environments, breathing protocols, or simply sitting without any input. The key is not duration, but consistency. Regular down-regulation allows your system to return closer to baseline between periods of stress. And you might even find that throughout your shifts, if you can just take those moments, where you have even 30 seconds to yourself without being stimulated, take those moments to maybe do some deep, slow breathing, focus on getting your stress and your sympathetic levels down to a more calmer state. And that will just allow yourself to, recover between those stressful periods within your shift and not see it as one big block of stressor. The second step is stabilizing your sleep signals. So even if your schedule is inconsistent, or you have, nights constantly, weekends, etc., evenings, you can still create these anchors. You can still optimize your sleep. It's not an all or nothing thing. You can't just accept you're going to have bad sleep, but there's a lot you can improve in terms of sleep. And this can just be simple things like light exposure at consistent times, a structured wind down routine to get that stress level lower, that resting heart rate lower before you go to bed, so you can fall asleep faster and get into deep sleep faster. Yeah, simple things like reducing that stimulation before sleep, and these cues help regulate your circadian rhythm despite this variability in your external environment and your shift patterns. Third step here I would do is rebuilding your physical movement as a stabilizing factor for energy as well. Regular movement improves insulin sensitivity, mood and recovery, as you know, and it also provides a physical outlet for stress, which reduces your overall system load. This does not require perfect programming, it requires consistency. And the fourth step here is rebuilding identity outside of medicine. This means reintroducing activities and structures that are not dictated by your role as a doctor. You know, you're more than just a doctor. You know, being a doctor is a great role, but you're more than that. You have different outlets, you have different personalities, different skills, and it's important to keep these up and exercise, because this will build up your resilience. So training, you know, social outlets, consistent practices that exist independently of your work are very important. This provides yourself with physiological stability and reduces the impact of work-related stress. The fifth step is recognizing that your current state is not your fixed state. So removing that limiting belief just because you're potentially burnt out or stressed or constantly tired right now doesn't mean that you can improve this with setting up these different systems over time. So if you feel tired, disconnected or inconsistent, it's not because you've lost the capacity, it's because your systems are not currently supporting your environment that you're in. And once these systems are adjusted, I have found in myself and other people, other doctors as well, performance, clarity and energy can improve dramatically. I learned this through experience, and there was a period where my baseline had dropped to a level that I was not happy with. I realized how far below my actual capacity I'd actually been operating at. I didn't realize this at the time until a bit of a quarter life crisis happened, or you know, a big warning sign happened, like, you know, I failed fourth year. So sometimes it takes something to remind you, but you don't have to wait to know this. You can realize this and you can make actions today. So the problem is, if you don't recognize these hidden costs, you might actually just adapt to them and recognize this, or you might actually adapt to them and this becomes your new normal. But if you do recognize this, you can rebuild from now. And if you want help implementing this properly on a proven roadmap personalized to you, you can book a clarity call with me in the description and we can give you that clarity. But otherwise, if you got value from this video, then I will see you on the next one.